All right. Welcome to the Mana Drain podcast. I'm Mox Born again. I'm flying solo today. This is episode 19 for, I guess it would be June 14th at this point since it is 1 a.m. Haven't been recording podcasts lately for the Mana Drained. Trying to get back in the swing of things, so this episode might be a little hodgepodge put back together. We don't really quite have our setup yet. Still looking to iron out the schedule with Magic Vice. We're looking to get that squared away, and hopefully we can get back to the fancy new graphics and all that stuff, and the great discussion that we've had in the past. But let me talk to you a little bit about what our podcast is, and who I am, and kind of give you a little bit of background as far as what we're trying to accomplish here. So the Mana Drain podcast was originally started with Magic Vice and myself to kind of recap some news about Magic, some decks that we're building, some different types of experiences that we've gone through with tournaments and with Friday Night Magic and constructed play and casual play and things like that. Sealed events, and really kind of get your average player that's just picking up the game and wants to learn more, learn how to play, where to find different events, where to find information, and really bring that to the forefront of their screens. But I digress. So I'm Moxborn again. I've been playing Magic. I've been playing Magic for I don't know how long. The first set I played was Tempest and probably Tempest Stronghold, Mirage era, and been playing pretty much ever since. I did take a brief timeout, a brief break, as many Magic players do. Probably right around just after Marcadia Mask. And I didn't play any tournaments or anything like that. We, were purely casual back then. I did, however, pick the game back up with Innistrad back in 2011 and have been playing like Friday Night Magic's tournament here or there, Columbus, Cincinnati, things like that. But having a really fun time doing it. I'm a very big proponent of building your own decks and, testing and revamping and all that stuff. Not that, net decking doesn't have its place and things like that for high-level competitive play, but I am very much a brew it and play it type of player, and take, ownership of my creations and things like that. So what we're going to talk about today, I've got two topics I want to talk about. This week has been announcement week for Wizards, so this makes it a good reason to kind of come back to podcasting and things like that, kind of get back in the swing of things. But what we're going to talk about today is the Metamorphose update that Mark Rosewater put out, and this has 5 changes coming to Magic the Gathering. This is a Mark he does an excellent job. He should. He's head of one of the R&D or creative, I'm not sure what, but he's way up there in the Magic universe, and as such he's been creating content for a long time. So the articles that he writes are top notch and are full of information, so highly recommend going and reading this all to you. I'm not going to bore you with the details, I'm not going to read it all to you, but it goes into like the successes. They first talks about the 2-block successes, and more worlds per year and things like that. And it talks about more large set lone draft environments. So like the difference between when we draft, you have one if it's just the main core sets like Amonkhet. We draft it with 3 Amonkhet's. And then when Hour of Devastation releases, we'll play 1 Amonkhet, and we'll draft 1 Amonkhet pack and 2 Hour of Devastation packs. Hour of Devastation being the smaller pack or smaller set. So this talks more about how how it's the larger sets is always the more popular, and this kind of dates back to when they had 3 sets in a block, and they always, we always knew that the third set was the weakest, and we thought that it was just because, players were playing this same set, the same block for an extended amount of time, and with it being a small set most of the time. In some cases, it's a larger set, but most of the time, the third set was a small set, and it didn't carry as much weight. So they switched gears to these 2-set blocks, and they're having the same problem with the second set being a small set. They're like, okay, this is still not working. So we'll talk about the change here in a minute. Then it also goes into storytelling, planeswalker decks, 2-year rotation, or then it goes into the challenges, excuse me. So challenges, 2-year rotation, small sets. This kind of goes into great detail about what type of sets were popular and what sets were not and why. No core sets. Core sets were dropped a few years back with Magic Origins was the last core set to release, or I guess quote-unquote core set. Challenge 4, too much focus on the Gatewatch, and they'll talk about that in a sec. And then Masterpiece sets was another thing they talk about. So then we go into our changes, and this is where it really gets good. And this is where I want you guys to kind of chime in, and on the YouTube page, youtube.com/72dpi online, on the Facebook page, also on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/72dpi online. I want to hear from you guys, finding out what you like, what you dislike, if this is something good that you're in, that's got you motivated to come back to standard. But let's talk about this real quick. So change 1, the fall, winter, and spring sets will be large sets and are drafted alone. So the whole idea behind this, the whole concept is these 3 sets that are the sets going forward will always be large, right? There's no more small sets. Okay, so you're always going to have the large popular sets out and about. The next change that's part of this is there are no blocks. Like, there's no 3-set block. There's no 2-set block. What Wizards is going to be doing is they're going to be making each set its own entity. So we're going to have Hour of Devastation, and then there's also going to be, I can't remember what it's called, Ixodon, I think, or Ixalan. And then the next set after that will be the last small set. Then from there on out, it's just going to be large, 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 for as far as the eye can see. What Wizards talks about in here is how they can stay at a plane as long as they need to, as long as the story allows them. This is excellent if they want, for storytelling purposes, because you can, you don't have to just follow the same set of 5 characters throughout the entire world. And then, when we leave a character behind, like Elspeth, a Johnny, Tybalt, when we leave those characters behind, we kind of lose sight of them, and we don't know what happens to them. Likewise, and we'll talk about the Gatewatch here in a minute, we have so many of the core Gatewatch players in the actual, spotlight, that there's not enough room for other characters to expand and grow as characters and have like a following. I mean, think of the Saheeli Rai, and I don't even know what the blue-white planeswalker was from Kaladesh. I don't even remember his name, because it didn't matter, because he wasn't one of the top tier cards. He wasn't very prevalent in the story. He was really just part of a side story. So to me, making these large sets and making it possible for Wizards to say, all right, we're going to take a set off, and we're, meanwhile on, Mirrodin, or, meanwhile, let's check in with, Johnny and see where he's at. Or, what about Garrick? Where's Garrick been? I mean, obviously he's on a hunt for killing planeswalkers, and has he been successful? We have no idea. But you know what? It sure would be great to take a brief time out from the flipping Gatewatch and go see what he's doing. How would you like to have a planeswalker deck that has this cursed Garrick plus the a planeswalker that he's hunting down? That would make an excellent story, an excellent Clash pack or planeswalker deck, or whatever you want to call them nowadays. But you could Wizards can do that. They can take these side steps and just be like, you know what, we're going to step aside from Hour of Devastation and, Nicol Bolas and all that. Meanwhile, over here, we're going to go take a look in here. The other cool thing that they're doing with this is they can extend the story depending on how well it's received. Obviously, they work way in advance, so the limitations are the knobs can only be turned so far, but they can return quicker. They can hey, this was well received. Let's kind of we'll go back there in a year and kind of put this set together. They did say that there will be some crossover as far as mechanics are concerned, so that's fantastic. Kind of works the same way as the current model works, but this gives us creative freedom to the storytelling, and I think this is one of the things that Magic has been lacking ever since Gatewatch, ever since Return to Zendikar. This is just one of those things where it's Return to Zendikar was awesome, or Battle for Zendikar was awesome. It was an epic battle, and then then the Gatewatch was formed, and it's okay, so now we have to follow this group of planeswalkers wherever they go. Obviously, they're going to fight evil in the first block, defeat evil in the second, or fight evil in the first set, defeat evil in the second set, and then they're going to planeswalk to another set, and then it's going to happen again and again. This is just going to be a great way for them to expand the story, expand the experience for other players. I couldn't be more happy about it. I think it's going to be excellent, and it's just going to be one of those things that makes the game that much better. Not to mention just more cards. Drafting and sealed, playing in sealed events where you have, you go to Hour of Devastation. It's going to happen. You go to Hour of Devastation and you're going to get 3 packs of Hour of Devastation and you're going to get 2 packs of Amonkhet. And it's always a bummer opening up those old cards. You're oh, okay, I've seen these. Yeah. I want to open the new cards, the new set, as many as I can. And play with as many of those cards as I can. I don't know how many times I'll open up, subpar of the new set and these excellent, limited staples in the old set. And I really don't want to play those. I want to play the new cards. And I'll just play, relatively worse cards, but because they're new, it's exciting and ooh, it's shiny. And I know that's not the, the spike way to play it, but it's, it's kind of just playing with new toys. So this will be a great break from that I'm only gonna get 2 sets. I'm only gonna get 3 packs of the new set and 2 of the old. So I guess I'm gonna have to open the old too and see what I get. So that's the fall, winter, and spring set. Now the summer set, coming, not the summer set in 2018, I believe, is gonna bring back core sets. So this is kind of interesting. So core sets were canceled and discontinued after Magic Origins, and I don't think that was wasn't any relationship or doesn't have any pull as to how bad Origins was, because I believe Origins was very good. There was it was a very strong set. I mean, that's where we got Jace, we got a lot of flip planeswalkers, a lot of backstory happened there, which is outstanding. Some really good staples were in that set, and some really good new cards were in that set. But the overall, I just don't think, and Wizards knew this, the community knew this, that the core sets really didn't have a purpose. They were kind of for new players, but old players really didn't care for them because the cards weren't really all that strong, minus a couple of them. And it really wasn't, they didn't use it like they're supposed to. They didn't use it to correct standard. They didn't use it to reprint cards that needed to be reprinted. So they're revamping these new core sets. And essentially what they're doing is it's going to be split 50-50. All the cards are going to be standard legal, but 50 of them are going to be new. 50% are going to be new. 50% are going to be reprints. And these are going to be needed reprints for standard to help fix issues with, mostly combo, because that's all that, Wizards cares about right now. But it's here to kind of fill that void, and, where you can't fit certain cards in each set, each block, or each thematical block. You can't fit like certain name cards with like specific keywords or specific names that just don't fit the lore. So this gives them an opportunity to reprint those cards that would make sense for constructed play, but not make sense inside of a thematical like a Amen Kent series, where it's Egyptian theme and things like that. So it's a great thing for them. They say in here where they have a better understanding of what they want the core set to do as far as appeal to new players and appeal to established players, and how to kind of get the ball rolling for the new players, so they don't feel like they're being left out after the new set comes out after the core set. So they've got a couple different promotions and things like that they're going to work towards and kind of push people into the next set, which is outstanding. I mean, new players are definitely needed. And I think this is probably one of the biggest controversies that you read about online, is how people are like, oh, core sets are terrible. They're not, they're just for new players, and there's nothing there for old established people. And to me, it's like, hey, we need new people to play our game. Otherwise, it doesn't survive. Right? Because how many people a day are quitting Magic, right? Especially with the ban and restriction list. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But how many people are quitting Magic a day? We need to bring people into Magic, and the core set is a great way to do that. To bring people back into Magic, that have quit or gone on hiatus, a core set is a great way to do that. Kind of get them back in the mood. I mean, once you've played Magic, it's not that difficult to get back into it. But having one of these core sets where you're not like jumping in right in the middle of a story, you're like, oh shit, what's going on in the story? Who are these people? Like, a core set's a good way to kind of get them reinvigorated and back in the limelight. So this is definitely a well received thing on my front. And anybody that plays the game and wants the game to be successful should feel the same way. And then we got this cool little diagram of what's going to be happening and things like that. So here you can see all the single sets individually. So 2-block set, 2-block set, 2-block set, and then here's the last of the 2-block set, Ixalan, and then they call it Eggs, which they're going to give us a name shortly. And then in the middle of 2018, next year, we're going to start getting one set. See, there's Magic Core set, boom. So, yeah, it's pretty exciting. So the next thing, the change number 3, is, and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, is a different approach to the Gatewatch. So recently, ever since the Gatewatch was formed, they have always been at the forefront of Magic. And that's kind of how it should be, as, we should have this, we should have like these faces of Magic, but they shouldn't be so prevalent that we get, like, we have 3 or 4 cards of one of those Planeswalkers in Standard at one time, right? There's no reason why we should have 4 Nissas in Standard. Likewise with Gideon, there's no reason for that, because all they're doing is, I don't want to say wasting cards, but they're using up resources. If you think about every time they print a Planeswalker, that's one ability, 3 abilities at the minimum, sometimes 4, inside that space that they can't, if they reprint it, then it's lackluster. We want new shiny things, right? So, not having them in the limelight, not having them at the forefront of every set is going to help out tremendously. We're going to get new Planeswalkers where you can see, where old Planeswalkers have been. Obviously these guys are still going to be the protagonists of the whole series, and they're going to be, we're probably going to be checking in on them from time to time. But at the end of the day, we need to make room for other Planeswalkers and other creative freedom. And it's really what this is going to be about, is just branching out the story. Number 4 is probably, to me, is probably the least impactful, for me at least, and that's the masterpieces will be in fewer sets. So bringing the masterpieces out with Battle for Zendikar was awesome. Being able to see those, Chase Mythic rares and the new artwork, this awesome border, and the full art was fantastic. And obviously, buying them outright is damn near expensive, and opening them up in packs is super fun, and it's fantastic, except for if you get like a standard rare land that's not worth much more than $10. But it's still exciting, right? And it makes sense, and that's kind of what Wizards talks about in this part of the article, talking about how we're going to cut back on masterpieces. Because there's not that many cards that need this type of treatment, or they're running out, and they need a way to build. It should be an experience to open up one of these cards, and what they're noticing is each time they've released 3 sets so far, and the third, it's just diminishing returns. It's just every time they do it, it's knocking down a notch. And I think they realized, most likely with Hour of Devastation, they're probably like, oh, you know what? These cards really aren't that popular, and they're not that expensive, and what's going to happen 4 or 5 sets down the road when we are reprinting masterpieces? Like, that's not going to work. So they've come up with a way where they're just going to release masterpieces when it makes sense. So obviously, for like Zendikar, reprinting these awesome fetch lands and iconic lands of Magic's history makes perfect sense, right? And Call of Expeditions makes sense. Creative win, reprint, filling that void in the market, win. As far as Kaladesh is concerned, getting the inventions, that was cool. Being able to get the swords reprinted and some really cool, like Scroll Rack was really awesome. Getting some really awesome artifacts reprinted to benefit those modern legacy players and standard players. Fantastic win, creatively, lore-wise, awesome. Works great. Invocations, not so much. Doesn't quite fit the bill. There really wasn't, if we go back to cons, putting together like a dragon masterpiece set, that would be fantastic, because that's what cons was about. The big ass dragons, the badass dragons of Magic. One of getting, I know Shivan Dragon is not a expensive card whatsoever, bulk rare, cheap as hell, reprinted into infinity, but getting some fantastic new artwork for that beast and putting it on a shiny new full art, borderless card, you're probably looking at like a $50 card right there. But, that's something that needs to come out, naturally. You can't force something like that. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some getting used to, but I don't think it's something that was taken lightly. I really don't. Just look at the difference between the first set of masterpieces all the way to the third set. It's the first 2 are just about neck and neck. I mean, Expeditions is a damn near perfect. The Invention series, just about perfect, and then just drops right off with the Invocation. So the change number 5, this one's actually pretty exciting. Now, we all know that Magic has R&D that tests things for standard and draft and stuff like that within its own wheelhouse. Things obviously get missed. Sihili Rai, Feldar Guardian is a perfect example. Same set, infinite combo, turn 4, not very fun to play against. It still can be beaten, but when it makes up a certain portion of the meta, then Wizards is like, okay, is this being detrimental to the game? Is it turning players off? What's the reaction from the community? Blah blah blah. So this is a way for them to look at standard as a whole, and apparently this new team, this play design team, is going to be working with R&D from start to finish on the sets. When they're doing card design and creating cards and balancing cards, they're going to be in those meetings. They've hired a couple pros, it looks like. Melissa DeToro is one of them, to come on full time from their contract work. So they're coming on full time. and they're going to help balance these not balance the cards out, but help find these niche cards that make the game not fun, right? So, and we'll talk about that. We will talk about that with the ban and restrictor list here in a minute. But this is a good thing, right? More people playing the game before it gets to the public's hands. Fantastic. Works great, right? So those are the 5 changes that are happening, in the next year or so. Obviously, some things are changing sooner than others, but in the next year, all these should be in full swing. So I'm pretty excited. This is, like I said, this is a great article to read. It's all good things. I mean, obviously, some of the changes when we went to a 2-block series are getting rolled back, and was the 2-block series or blocks, that 2 series blocks, that bad of an idea? No, but I think the pushback and the information that they've got, I think they've made some really good changes. And again, we can always revisit it in 3 years, 4 years, and roll back something else. Like, let's say, the Gatewatch thing doesn't work out, right? Let's say we go and find out what Garruk's doing, and it's boring as hell, and it's puts some of the worst cards in standard, and it's not exciting whatsoever. You don't get the the interaction between the, like you do with the Gatewatch crew. And we'll go back to the Gatewatch. That's just one example. Not necessarily how I feel, but the nice thing is that this company, Wizards, cares about its community enough to make these changes based on the community's reaction. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is this banned and restricted update that just happened. I guess it would be yesterday because it's now 11/26 or 1/26 on the 14th. Aetherworks Marvel has been banned. So for those of you that are living under a rock, Aetherworks Marvel is a legendary artifact that costs 4 mana. Whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get 1 energy. Okay. But for 6 energy, you can tap it and pay 6 energy. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any random order. So this card has been a huge part of Magic since its release. It started out as a kitchen table casual card because it's a 4 mana artifact that you have to play one of the I don't want to say it, one of the subpar mana fix or mana costs, the sub mana cost. So it's like the energy is like colorless mana before, like the Wingding thing. So it's a very specific, very niche type of card. But when you combine that with some of the more powerful creatures in the block or in the set and in the surrounding sets, you get a very powerful effect. Playing cards for free has always been a rough spot, a very, you have to walk that fine line. Wizards has to walk that fine line so that they don't make it too powerful. I think this card might not be too powerful, but the cards that it pulls in standard, those are the ones that are very powerful. So the problem that I have with this, with banning cards in standard in general, is it just doesn't look good. It really doesn't. You're a company trying to promote your newest set. These cards are the packs are obviously the most available, right? You're not paying $15 for a pack of cards from original Ravnica. You're paying $4, $5, $4.50 for a pack of cards, and you open this card and you're like, oh yeah, awesome, mythic rare, legendary artifact. That's awesome. It's like the poster child for energy. One of the top cards that's promoting their new ability and their new mana cost of energy, and it's banned. So that's kind of the feel bads, right? I mean, that's the same thing happened with Emrakul, the Promised Ends, which Emrakul, the Promised Ends, very powerful. But my thing was, there's plenty of ways to deal with these cards in standard, Like there's plenty of ways. For instance, I just did a quick search on my phone for cards that destroy artifacts. I costed them 3 or less just because this comes out on turn 4. Very rarely will someone get it out earlier than that, just based on the decks that have been built. But nevertheless, it could come down on turn 3 under the right circumstances. But anyway, and I only looked at instants as well, so you could leave up mana and cast it on their turn when this drops. So destroy target artifacts. I've got 3 cards just in my quick review. I'm sure there's more. Appetite for unnaturals, 2 and 1 green. Let's see here. It's an instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, and you gain 2 life. Not a great card. No, you do not want to main deck this. Not at all. Right? This is not a main deckable card because there's not really there's some enchantments that lock down creatures, but people don't really play those that much. So not even in sealed is this, an okay card. This is a sideboard card. And I think that's going to be the main story of this whole thing is, yes, Aetherworks Marvel is a oppressive card, but there's always going to be one of those decks. Like, there's always going to be someone that's playing the same deck as 30%, 40%, 50% of the tournament. There's always going to be that. Like, there's never going to be, like, one deck for every person, right? That's not going to happen. When you live in a day of the internet where information flies at the speed of light, people... And not only that, you have... information about tournaments and results, deck lists, win percentages. That's just the way it's going to happen, right? People don't play shitty decks to win tournaments. They play the best, not most popular, the best, most efficient deck to win their tournament, right? That's just the way it is. And I just don't understand the idea. I mean, banning cards because it's oppressive, and when you have a card or a deck that's upwards of 75%, where everybody is using it, then we can probably talk. Then there's probably an issue. But my thinking is, the way my brain works is, okay, so 50% of the people that are going to be at this tournament coming up is going to be playing Aetherworks Marvel. That means I need to build a deck that beats this deck, because everybody's going to be playing that deck. And then I'll build my sideboard to beat the other decks, the zombie decks, and the other control decks or whatever. But my main 50% of the time I'm going to be playing this deck, that's like a no-brainer for me. Like that just makes it that much easier to figure out, like, oh, this is what I need to build. But the thing is, people don't work that way. And it's not, I'm not calling people lazy or anything, but like, and maybe it is the best deck to play even in the mirror. Who knows? But so continuing on with destroy artifacts. So you got decommission is 2 generic and a white for instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. And if you've got revolt with one of your permanents leaving the battlefield this turn, you gain 3 life. Not just like appetite. Not very good at all. No, not very good. Still 3 mana, destroy this thing. Not too bad, right? Yeah, they might get one spin on it, because it's possible to have 6 energy on turn 4 when this thing drops. So I understand the concept of, I play this, okay, you target this, in response to you casting that spell, I'm going to tap it and spin. You're going to get 1 spin, okay, but after that 1 spin, this is going to be destroyed. You are out of energy. You're not, you got to rebuild. And then I've got another set of turns where I can, build my mana base up and try to win the game. Looks like Dissenter's Deliverance. 1 and a green. Instant, destroy target artifact, cycling green. So this is a much better spell because it has cycling. So you play this card in your main deck, play maybe 1 or 2 copies just in case you play Aetherworks Marvel. Odds are you're going to, because it's 50% of the meta. If you're not playing it, the other 50% of the time you're going to cycle it. maybe you put an extra copy in your sideboard, so you have a total of 3 copies in your 75. Not a bad idea. You have to play green. That's, that is what it is. You need to figure out what you're going to play there, but you got a couple different, energy decks, delirium decks. Hell, I've even seen people with splashing green in their zombie deck. So, again, knowing that you are going to be playing this deck 50% of the time, you would think that people would say, hey, okay, how do I beat this deck? Is it possible? What cards beat Aetherworks Marvel? That's what I'm trying to do here. So Exile is another great way to get rid of this hell of a problem. Anguish the Unmaking is a very, very versatile card, because not only does it exile artifacts, it exiles all non-land permanents, right? One of non-land permanents. So it's 1 blue or 1 black, white, so 3 mana. Instant exile target non-land permanent, you lose 3 life. Obviously, the losing 3 life is but that's better than an Ulamog coming down on turn 4 and smashing your face in 2 turns. So, gladly take the 3 life over the 20, just my opinion. But, again, instant speed, exile, gets rid of it, awesome. Obviously, they'll probably have 2 or 3 more in their deck, because that's the way the deck works. So, for that, obviously, trying to get rid of multiple copies at once, so you don't want to fill your deck up with removal, artifact removal. You want to have a win condition in there. You could use Dispossess. 2 generic, 1 black sorcery. Name an artifact. Exile all cards from target player's hand, library, and graveyard. That's it. Aetherworks Marvel. Gone. Now you're going to have to cast your Ulamog for real. Okay, that's now your deck's playing fair magic. Same thing with Forsake the Worldly. This exiles target artifact or enchantment, has cycling 2 generic. So this is 2 generic and a white to cast, instant speed. Just the same thing as destroy artifacts. It's not that good, but if you know you're gonna be playing against 50%, it all goes back to that percentage, right? That's kind of like, if you know what you're playing against, then why wouldn't you put something in your deck? Even though it's a bad card, the cyclers are really good, because at least they make up for the other 50% when you're not playing Aetherworks Marvel. And even then, some decks even have artifacts and enchantments in there just for you've got the Gearhulks and the lockdown cards, like not the Oblivion Rings, the Oblivion Ring, yeah. But and then at the very least, you can cycle it away. So to me, if I know 35, 45, 50% of the people I'm going to be playing as this, I'll gladly play those cards, because it's going to hate on that deck. And if I can get rid of that Marvel, it's gone. Now the other thing that you could do, and this is just common sense, is get rid of what they're marveling for, right? So your Ulamogs, right? Get rid of Ulamog. How do you do that? It's indestructible. Well, you lost legacy it, right? 1 black sorcery. Name a non-artifact, non-land card. Exile all cards from hand, library, and graveyard. And then that player draws cards for every card exiled from their hand. Okay, so you're giving them a couple extra cards. Not that big of a deal, right? But you're getting their win condition out of their deck. Like, I don't understand that. I don't get it. So, needless to say, everything we just talked about doesn't matter anymore, because Aetherworks Marvel has been banned in Standard. And again, like, I'm not a professional Magic player by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just a player that enjoys building decks, and I see a challenge and I want to build a deck to beat that deck. So, like, there's plenty of cards in here to finish off Aetherworks Marvel. I didn't even talk about any blue counterspells, right? So on turn 4, you should have sufficient mana. You can cast Cancel, for God's sakes. And Cancel is essentially unplayable in Constructed Standard, right? There's plenty of other counterspells out there. So at the end of the day, Should it have been banned? Probably not. Would Magic continue to thrive with it in Standard? Yes, it would have. We'll talk about next week. There's some new cards that were spoiled for the new set. We'll talk about those next week. But, at the end of the day, it just doesn't look good. I mean, there's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are now 5 cards banned for Standard. 5 cards. And it's just a sad state. It really is. I mean, even I think we talked about the Feldar Guardian banning a while back. Being able to interrupt that combo and kill off Saheeli Rai before she can duplicate the cat, easy as pie. Killing that cat isn't that difficult. But people just don't want to play the subpar cards because it's not as efficient. And it doesn't play into the other percentages of the decks that they're going to be playing against. But it all goes back to, if you're going to be playing this game, we'll even call it 30%, 33%. If you're going to be playing 1 out of 3 games playing against this deck, I'm sorry, that's good odds that you're going to be playing that deck more than once in a tournament. So why wouldn't you want to shape your deck around that? Yeah, you're going to be playing some subpar cards, but it's just going to be the shell of your deck, right? You're going to still have your mana ramps, you're still going to have your combo pieces, you're still going to have your win conditions, but control, should be, if you know that there's going to be 30% of the player base playing this deck, control should be in your mind. Like, I need to be able to control the game of Magic when I'm playing this deck. Because if on turn 4, they have a possibility of winning the game outright. So to me, it's just one of those things that just needs to be recognized. I'm hoping, with the player test group that Wizards put together, that we won't come across this and we won't have to ban cards. And the sad part is, they're just banning it because it's the best deck. You're always going to have the best. There's always going to be a best deck. And that's not a reason to ban cards. Because all it does is frustrate people. The people that are happy about it are generally the ones that play it but want to win, right? They know it's going to, it's an effective deck. You've got a 40% chance of hitting Ulamog, and if don't have it in your hand, they're all 4 in your library, and you've got 6 energy on turn 4. You have a 40% or 30 something percent to hit Ulamog. Like, that's fantastic. Like, fantastic odds. Why wouldn't you take those odds? But, just going back to my thought process and how I would approach it, if I was a professional Magic player and I had, infinite time to practice and play against other professionals, I would look and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the deck we're going to be playing against. We need to build a deck to beat this deck. From the podcast and the interviews that I've listened to, most pros will, when they do their boot camps or whatever, they will build a deck to beat the deck that beats this deck, right? But if you're doing that, I think you might be going just a step too far when the meta is so structured around this one card, this one deck. You might be going a step. You might be overthinking it, right? I don't know, and I may be completely wrong, but to me, it just seems so cut and dry. So, but anyway, guys, that's enough of me rambling for one episode. I really do appreciate you watching. Those of you on Twitch, .tv/72DPI online. You guys are fantastic. Make sure if you're watching on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/72DPI online, hit the subscribe button. We really do appreciate it. Leave a comment down in the comments below. Really would appreciate it. If you want to support the show, or the channel for that matter, that's a great way to do it. It's free, doesn't cost you a dime, lets us know what you like, and gets the conversation rolling. So we'll be back next week, or at least I'll be back next week. We'll talk about some spoilers, some really cool cards coming out. And actually, spoilers, they're not, they're leaks. They are not official release cards. We got a new Nicol Bolas to talk about, a badass Wrath to talk about. Some really sweet cards. So yeah, looking forward to doing that, kind of breaking those down. Hopefully we'll get a few more in there coming up. We're right in the middle of announcement week, so let's hope that we'll get a couple more actual official spoilers and some more stuff to talk about. So we'll be back next week, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.